Rayz Dayz, episode 158. This is a weekly diary podcast hosted by me, Ray Taylor. As I do on every single episode of Rayz Dayz, I want to bring up and talk about something I'm thankful for, and I will be putting a list together of things that I've been thankful for in past episodes. So for one, I don't repeat myself. Because I could easily be doing that today. I could have easily done that in the past. So to avoid repeating myself, but also just as a way to, visualize and see, at least for myself, see all the things that I am thankful for. Because it's an exercise that, just trying to make me grateful and avoid being negative, trying to at least take some time out of my day, of my week, to think about and appreciate something that's positive in life, which, it's so easy to highlight the bad things in life, now more than ever. So easy, as things are constantly and continually getting worse and bad and all of that. So this week, what I am thankful for is a podcast called The Dollop. This is a podcast that's hosted by Dave Anthony and Gareth Reynolds. It is an American history podcast where each week Dave reads a story from American history to Gareth, who has no idea what the topic is about. So each episode is well researched, and they provide all of their sources for this story from history, this history lesson, as it were. So it's a great podcast to learn American history and to see how often things repeat themselves, and to see how certain political groups have played by the exact same playbook the entire time, except for they just change it from, instead of marginalizing and accusing trans people of being evil, it was black people, and before that it was gay people, or before trans it was gay, and before gay it was black. It's like they've always been doing this as far back as America has been around. And you even see it in other places as well, right? But it's a great podcast. It's not just about that. It's about a lot of things. They've been doing it for years, this podcast. So they have a massive catalog of all of these different historical events that they talk about. It's one I mentioned. There's a story recently where Elon Musk wants to make a company town, and there is a great episode on Pullman, where if you want to find out why Labor Day is a thing, you want to find out why company towns are probably a bad idea, and this idea that Elon Musk has that this company town is going to be some kind of utopia is exactly what Pullman thought his town was going to be. And you see how that can easily go bad when you live in a town that is controlled by the person that you also work for. So they have tons of stories. There's fun stories as well. Like there's one on the Rube, which is a baseball player, which if you want to know where that term, the Rube, comes from, finding out about him, one of their early stories. They did a story on tickling, which ended up inspiring a documentary called Tickled, which is a crazy rabbit hole of a documentary that was inspired by an episode of The Dollop. An amazing show, but also not only is it historically accurate and interesting, the format where Dave is reading this well-researched historical story to Gareth has no idea. So you're getting an authentic reaction to what is happening in the story. And Gareth is also hilarious. They're both comedians. I think Dave is a former comedian. They're both writers. They're both in the entertainment industry. Gareth just released a special on YouTube recently called England, Weed, and the Rest, which is a hilarious stand-up special. He's hilarious in this podcast, so it's funny as well as informative, which is great. And it's great. It's a really great combination. It's a great formula. It's a very successful podcast. They've recently done a spin-off podcast called The Pastimes, where Dave will select a newspaper from the 1650s to current day, which 1650s is when newspapers first started, and he will pick a story from somewhere in the U.S. and read the crazy stories where you find out that newspapers were basically the quote-unquote stories that were in newspapers a long time ago, and even up until kind of recently even, are basically tweets that you would see on social media. They would like no different than social media posts. And everybody that thinks that people have changed and act different and all of these things that they blame on social media is the exact same way people have always been. And it is no different other than the medium it is being distributed, right? When newspapers were around, people were glued to their newspapers, right? When cell phones came around, people are glued to their cell phones, right? It's not like we lived in this utopian society at one point. It's always been the same, always. History repeats itself at all times. But the past times is really funny as well, because obviously you're getting a collection of stories. You're getting, and it's told to... So Dave reads it to Gareth and a guest, and usually the guest is another comedian. So you're getting, multiple kind of commentary and jokes being made over the ridiculous nature of these stories that were in newspapers. So a great spinoff, a great podcast. Both of them are. They also do live shows, the Dollop. They do tours where they perform live. They do stories live in front of audiences all across America, as well as, I believe, Canada, and they definitely go out to Australia, at least before the pandemic. I think now they still do the touring, but I don't think it's nearly as much. But a great show. I've been able to go see one of their live shows when I lived in Denver, which was really great. And Gareth is somebody that I've known for years before he even started doing this podcast. He was a regular guest on one of my old podcasts called the Inspired Disorder Podcast, where he came on a bunch of times as a guest. He's a great dude. I had not only just on the podcast, but had the opportunity to actually hang out with him. And he's a great dude, absolutely hilarious. He also produces a bunch of shows. He's done voice work on a bunch of like animated stuff. He's doing all kinds of things. Very talented, very funny, as well as Dave Anthony, who wrote on Maron's TV show. They both were on Maron. Gareth was on one of the last. He's like a animal control guy or an exterminator, something like that. So anyway, great show. They're great people. And if you want to learn about history, as the education system in the United States is being gutted, specifically historical education, and you want to know the reality of things told in a format that is well researched and gives all of their sources. Not only in the podcast does he read off the sources, but also there is a complete list of all their sources on their website. So it's not just a story. It is historically accurate as can be. I highly recommend checking out the Dollop. It's a great show. Even if you're not into history, if you're into funny things, right? You want to hear crazy stories and hear funny people riff on those stories. It's great. It's absolutely great. And that's why it's something that one of the reasons I love podcasts is it feels like you're hanging out with people, right? Whether it's the podcast, the Dollop, or the movie podcast I've been listening to for, almost 15 years called The Filmcast. You get to know the hosts, and when you listen to them, it feels like you're hanging out with people that you know and you like, and you also get something out of it. So it's like, especially during the pandemic, it was great. And even just my life in general, how crazy my life has been, leaving my day job, trying to make things work, moving to Denver, having everything completely fall apart, and then somehow getting back to the desert and putting things back together and making another attempt at trying to make podcasting and art work as a means for me to survive. Throughout that entire journey for me, the highest highs and the lowest lows, podcasts have always been there. And this is one of the podcasts that has always been kind of a go-to, and it's always like a welcome thing to show up every week in my podcast feed, to not only get to hang out and listen to well-informed, cool, fun people, but also to get something out of it, to like make my brain smarter, and to see how absolutely ridiculous it is that history repeats itself so much to such a degree of accuracy that it is absolutely insane, and not surprising at all that people who tend to be the ones repeating history in the most evil ways are also the people who are attacking history as it is in schools. So check it out. It's a must for anybody into history. It's a must for anybody that likes to laugh. So that is what I'm thankful for this week, the Dollop. And it's available on everywhere podcasts are found. They even have a Patreon where they do stuff. Gareth takes tests, quizzes to see how much he remembers from the podcasts. There's a lot. You can watch the video version of the show. Their Patreon is very good as well, so you can check that out too. But that is what I'm thankful for this week, the Dollop. And I'm also thankful, as always, for the opportunity to connect with you through this podcast, and for the chance to share my journey with you. Please join the conversation by leaving a comment or a rating on your favorite podcast platform, or over on youtube.com/inspired disorder. Hit subscribe over on YouTube. Watch. I make a little bit of money there, so watch the show, subscribe, share it, all that kind of stuff. youtube.com/inspired disorder. And thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next Saturday for another episode of Rayz Dayz. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.